After the NBC meeting talking about the meeting with the CBN Bank, they have increased the rate, which is talking about 24.75%. We will recall that they were supposed to have another meeting, and that meeting held yesterday, and that is where the decision was taken to increase this rate. Good morning, welcome to the Dailies, where we keep you updated with all that is happening from the papers this morning. I am Seda Elisha Dasho, and I'm doing the program alongside Rachel Tazi. Good morning.
Good morning, Celia.
All right, and to our viewers at home, remember you can follow us live via Facebook and YouTube. Drop your comment, your views, and also contribution on any of the story that is of interest to you this morning. And we should start with the Leadership newspaper.
On the Leadership newspaper, the big story, as attacks on farmers escalate, 18.6 million Nigerians face acute hunger. And we have a little infograph here showing food exportation, agri precisely, 2018, 2019, the billions that have been spent on food importation as of 2018, we're seeing 302 billion, 2019 over 200 billion, and then down to 2020 we're seeing 322, and then 2021 spiked up to 505 billion, and then 2022 we're at 591 billion naira. That is when it comes to the importation of food in the country. And then we have 100 million food insecure Nigerians, rise to 100 million from 66.2 million in 2023. So as at this year, March 2024, we are up to 100 million facing food insecurity. Then we have farmers lost their lives into insecurity in 2024. Just for this year, we are already having a number of 165. Still on the papers, federal government to roll out malaria vaccine in Bayelsa and Kebbi. NACON takes Umrah visa issue to Saudi Arabia. CBN's 24.75% rate hike puts borrowers on the edge. Approval for $2.4 billion forex backlog withheld for ineligibility. This is coming from Cardoso because the ones that have been cleared are for valid transactions. You can start with the details on the front page and continue on page 7. DSS invited me to find solution to banditry. This is a statement from Sheikh Gumi, but then the federal government is saying a different thing. Gumi is saying he was called upon to give solution to banditry, and while the information we have is different concerning why he was being called in. You can find details of his statement on page 7. Public sector most affected by corruption, and that is very true to a large extent. Chinese who killed Nigerian girlfriend to die by hanging. IPOB gets funds from affiliates in 22 countries. This is coming from the NFIU. And still in Okwama, slain soldiers for burial today. Details can be found on page 6, and that's all the news on Leadership newspaper.
On the Blueprint newspaper, Army to bury the 17 soldiers killed in Okwama today, which we said would happen at the National Cemetery in Abuja, and the president has been billed to be the special guest. So, and that burial will be taking place by 3 p.m. today. So for those who want to know more detail, you can do well to read that on page 7 of the Blueprint newspaper. Money in circulation hit 95.56 trillion naira in February. More detailed in the paper. Also here we're seeing on Olympics, Team Nigeria sure of gold in Paris, and we wish them all the best. The big story, save Zamfara from terrorism to protect the North, Lawan begs Tinubu. You can find more detail of that story. Tinubu believes truthful information is antidote to sectional agenda, coming from Shetima, the vice president. Federal government effort yielding results, coming from Idris. CBN raises interest rate to 24.75%, probe $2.4 billion FX transaction. Rate hikes will bring more pressure on the CBN SLF, so you can find more detail of that. Labour Party DS NLC insists on holding convention today, which you can find on page 9. Suspected ritualist behead woman in Osun State. More detail on page 6. And in Kano State, we have a Chinese national who killed his girlfriend to die by hanging. And you can find more detail of that on page 7. We have a picture story at the front page of the paper. You can do well to get the paper, read more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you.
On Vanguard, CBN raises interest rate to 24.75%, insists all verified FS backlog cleared. Umehia was never governor of Rivers, court rules. Collaboration with SEC, EFCC, NSA fruitful. This is coming from the CBN governor concerning Binance. NSE president chairs Vanguard International Women's Day as Okotete, Osafile, Ambrose Medeben, others attend. You can find details on page 10. Zamfara under siege, Governor Lawal tells Tinubu this is concerning banditry. How government security bodies fail to rein in militant leader. Vanguard investigation, the writer saying, I petitioned presidency, state government security bodies to no avail. This is coming from His Royal Highness of Ofongo. And then troops knew where the killer was and went there. Troops knew where the killer was and went there. Monarch forced to take oath of allegiance to militant leader. Diri Silva in verbal war. Militant leader dismisses JTF's allegation of his involvement in bunkering. Delta community cries out as soldiers comb homes, shrine for stolen weapons. Troops seize 12 local vigilante guns. Tinubu to attend today's burial of slain 17 soldiers. And then we have soldiers invaded my country home at Cable Do. This is coming from Edwin Clark. Details of the big story can be found on page 5 and the writers on page 12. Coca to federal government, interrogate persons with ties to bandits. No cause for alarm, says Gumi after questioning by security agents. Kingmaker boycott meeting over Olubadan designates absence. Firms vows to deliver 3,050 megawatt hydro power project. This is concerning the Mambila power project. Details can be found on page 11. We have a column by Afe Babalola on page 22. Nigeria can host Commonwealth Games successfully. Eno is boasting. This is concerning sports. You can find details on page 39. And then Senate delegation to IPU visit Okonjo-Iweala, where we can see Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, and then the Senate President Opapio and others. And that's all the news on Vanguard newspaper.
On the Guardian newspaper, CBN seeks growth for foreign capital inflow as Naira nears 1,300 to $1. More detail on page 6. NLC wants as new minimum wage committee meets. You can find more detail of that in the paper. And we will record that last week we are supposed to know the result of that committee between today and tomorrow, Richard. And here we're seeing NLC's warning as the new minimum wage committee meets. So we look forward to seeing the outcome of that meeting as it will be holding today. More detail can be found on page 5. Court nullifies Rivers' recall of 697 million naira ex-governor's pension from Omiaha. You can find that story on page 5. And on insecurity, Clark Mamu hit back at handling of Delta killing and anti-terrorism, detailed on page 6. Also, we are having Femi Falana to the AGF and EFCC stop looking for loopholes and scapegoats on Mambila hydro dispute, detail found on page 5. Nigeria to import 7 million barrels of U.S. crude oil in 2 months. And on the issue of unpaid salaries, how Labour bill target private employers, exempt debtors, government and MDAs. You can find our news analysis on page 4. And that's all on the Guardian newspaper.
On Nigerian Tribune, Ayedatiwa, APC others mourn as governorship aspirant Akintelori dies at 61. We We have Oborini's group demands investigation into sudden death. While we have not yet nominated Ola Kelohin as new Olubadan, this is coming from the Kingmaker. You can find details on page 6. Cost of borrowing to rise as CBN raises benchmark interest rate to 24.75%. Cardoso says $2.4 billion forex forward backlog ineligible for payment. In Plateau, 16 APC lawmakers seek Tinubu's intervention. You can find details on page 13. Slain soldiers to be buried today. Pay Hajj fare based on dollar exchange rate, Nakon tells pilgrims. Celebrating Africa heritage, empowering local artisans central to our mission. This is coming, a statement from Fumilayo Grace Oni, Ration Deluxe CEO. Details can be found on page 22. Lagos are going to experience high rainfall and strong winds. Gani Adams speak on face-off with Igboho Sanwo-Olu's chief of staff. Details can be found on page 2, and that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
On the Daily Times newspaper, the issue of hunger. Federal government to establish nutrition departments in some ministries as they are determined to accelerate the implementation of nutrition and related intervention in Nigeria. The Vice President, Sheitima, have said that the federal government will prioritize the creation of nutrition departments in designated federal ministries and also to improve funding of nutrition activities, among others. So you can start reading more detail of that on the front page and continue on page 5. The issue of banditry, Governor Lawan to Tinubu, please help Zamfara under siege. And I like the sincerity of this governor, and then admitting the fact that Zamfara honestly has been a soft spot when it comes to the issue of banditry. We've had series of attacks, series of abduction, farmers being killed.
Yeah.
Just name everything. Students are not safe, farmers are not safe, workers, nobody tends to be safe. We saw even the abduction of even some of the higher institutions, students as well, the ladies that were being kidnapped. So right now we're seeing that the governor is actually calling on the president, because of course we know that, I mean, our president is a chief of armed force, so definitely he should be the person to be able to do that, because the governors most time have little or no power over all of this thing, because they take directive straight from the federal government. So as it is presently, he seems handicapped to the issue of this. I clearly remember there was a time the governor of Borno State actually said if there was a need for the government to employ foreign mercenaries to help to fight this thing, it is not out of place, because it seems we're overpowered. I remember where we saw even U.S. coming at a point in time during the abduction of the student, saying that they would love to help, and then we're yet to hear the outcome of the decision coming from the federal government. But honestly, this is just Zamfara crying out. It's a matter of time more governors will be crying out, because the way things are moving in almost every part of the country right now is going through one form of attack or the other. So I hope that the president will listen to his cry, and then we'll be able to see what can be done. Here we're seeing Gumi telling us he was invited so that they could see how they can come up with the issue of ban. Well, regardless, all we know is that the fact that we're told that he will be going through questioning because of his suggestion always concerning negotiating with bandits and all of that. But these are people are beyond bandits. They are terrorists, so we need to label them as that. They are enemies of the country and need to be treated as one. But to the issue of what is happening right now in Zamfara is beyond banditry, Rachel. Bandits will just come, take and go. But right now we're seeing people that are being taken away. Your food stuff are taken, schools have been burned down. So this is beyond just normal robbery or banditry issue. So I am hoping that there will be help that will be sent to Zamfara and any other state that's actually going through the same attack as Zamfara state.
We saw how 17 APC lawmakers are telling President Tinubu also to come to the aid of Plateau State. And I think over the years, we just have governors being silent, but if everybody was to come out and call for help, a lot of states will be calling out for help. I've not heard Kaduna governor calling for help in as much as he needs to call for help. Not the past administration, neither is the present calling for help. and then for Zamfara also calling for help and all of that. We need to know that we have gotten to the point where we need help, and we should get this help by all means and at every cost. I believe that if you are declaring a state of emergency when it comes to insecurity, it's everything, it's whatever it takes. And I'm not seeing that approach yet. So it's just, we'll call them to book, but there is no state of emergency on insecurity. And that is why it keeps thriving. And that is why we just see these bandits having a swell time doing whatever they want to do. And then we can talk about Sheikh Gumi just coming out and saying something else concerning what he was being called for. And the question always is, on what grounds are you called for the way forward to bandit situation in the country? What is your security expertise and track record of solving bandit situation? And if you were one time a general and we are calling you, what was done at your time when certain thing was a problem, then we can say, yes, you can provide solution to a problem. But what do you know about banditry that you are better than the military, other than if you are not part of them? I mean, the more this man speaks, the more you wonder, what do you know more than the government, and whose side are you? Because you're not obviously employed under any security agency, neither do you have that expertise and all of that. Stella, we can talk about security. I keep saying it, every single day is facing us. But as far as I'm concerned, I am yet to see the government taking an approach that will end security anytime soon. I am yet to see that. I keep seeing politics being played. I keep seeing the lives of people being toyed with as if it doesn't matter. I am absolutely, I don't know yet, but when it's beginning to happen, you will know. But as it is now, it's just actions after what has been done have happened, after the people that have been cheated, their lives cut short, communities being, that is all I am saying. But I am yet to see an action stopping these things from taking place. And until we get to that point, the government is still operating on the same level, and we are still where we are.
Well, Rachel, I hope that they will do, because we cannot deny the fact that this insecurity is actually stopping governance and also stopping progress and growth in the country, because definitely no governor can take any decision when he's battling with insecurity in his country, in his state rather. I mean, you cannot be talking about developing infrastructures and then you're still battling with either one form of insecurity or the other. So just like we say, we hope that help will be sent out to all of the states that actually have been crying and are still crying for help. Still on Daily Times newspaper, CBN raises the benchmark interest rate by 200 basic points to 24.75%. You can read more of the issue that happened during the Monetary Policy Committee of the meeting yesterday and how they came up with this benchmark. Bridge collapses in U.S. after being hit by cargo ship. You can find detail in the paper. PDP reviews 10 of executives in 26 states. National Assembly seek collaboration with the WTO on improving digital and marine economics. More detail on page 17. How Safe School Initiative cop kidnapping of students in Borno. This is coming from Zulum, and I hope that he'll be able to tip the governor of Zamfara on that and other governors as well, how he was able to come up with that initiative. More detail on page 2. We have a picture story, a mixer truck swerved into the drainage as a result of brake failure, and we can see that it happened to be one of these Dangote cement trucks. We hope that something will be done about that. We've seen issues coming from all of these trucks, not just Dangote truck, but a number of trucks that actually are not well taken care of, and we see various states trying to come up with other modalities to control this issue, where we see them after losing brake, people die. We had that incident in Plateau State just recently. So we hope that something will be done. I mean, we've seen various states trying to come up with other, maybe giving them a time where they can actually ply the route so that they can actually reduce the casualties we always have as a result of that. So more detail of that can be found in the paper, and that's all on Daily Times newspaper.
On Nigerian News Direct, gains in Naira slashes customs duty exchange rate by 3%. relieves importers. I believe that this is a good news for importers, as in the past weeks we saw how they were abandoning cars and how clearance fee was so high, and even a car that should be easily accessed by a common man was so expensive that it has literally become a big man's car. You can find details on page 4. FRSC returns 1.6 million naira to road crash victims' families in Bauchi. Court sentences Chinese national to death for killing Nigerian girlfriend. Economic policy overhaul against CBN hikes MPR by 200 base points to 24.75% amid inflationary pressures. Adjust merchant bank cash reserve ratio to 14%. MPC focuses on food insecurity to address skyrocketing inflation. This is coming from Cardoso, and I hope that this increase in the MPR will truly help inflation in the country. Come to our aid. We are under siege. Zamfara governor appeals to Tinubu. Styrofoam ban. Local food vendors defy government, decry high economic cost. Under 2024, how Akintelure's death miscuffle APC primaries. Details can be found on page 13, and that's all the news on Nigerian News Direct.
A New Telegraph newspaper on the forest backlog. CBN engages security agency to prop claims. Jack up lending rate to 24.75% to rein in inflation. And on premium, Nigeria's insurance sector overshot 1 trillion naira, detailed on page 8. Make agribusiness glamorous to our youth, Obasanjo tells the federal government, and you can find more detail of what he has to say about that on page 3. Lagos state government warn against massive flooding and downpour, so that is to say those living by the waterside need to look for an alternative so that they don't get affected by this. We prosecuted 29,052 cases in the first year. This is coming from the police headquarters. You can find detail of that. Also, here we are having a big story on the Okwama soldiers that were slain. Soldiers invaded my country home and father's compound, coming from Clark. Says the troop claimed they were looking for soldiers' killer. Seek judicial inquiry into Okwama tragedy. Residents flee following the invasion, and then army buries the 17 slain officers and soldiers. Today, detailed on page 3 and 4. And on 2023 polls, PDP reads riot act demands list of anti-party members. Gumi honors DSS invitation, says interaction productive. Reps demand audit of vandalized railway tracks and assets, detailed on page 5. Governor Lawan to Tinubu deal with Zamfara bandits, raid north of insecurity. Lament the state is under siege. Tinubu to judges with more street kidnappers as terrorists. Detailed on page 2 and 5. 495 million naira debt. UCH plucked into darkness as disco cuts off power. And here Niger lawmakers claim the governor to pull states out of the ADC over poor supply. You can find detail on page 4. We have a study that said bright outdoor light at night may increase stroke risks. You can read more detail of that on page 7. We have a picture story as well. You do well to read more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you.
On Daily Independent, PDP NWC meets state chairman to end lingering crisis in the party. Ask them to submit list of members involved in anti-party activities. $800 million trap funds clearance. Foreign airlines asked to open lower inventory tickets. This is very important. You can start with the details on the front page. Why Nigerian airlines can't be part of global alliance. This is coming from an expert. We're not helping the country when farmers get loan at 25% interest rate, says Obasanjo. 5 suspects arrested over murder of 6 policemen in Delta. I discussed how to curb banditry with security agencies, says Gumi. NUPRC gives crude oil committee 48 hours to improve production and supply. Nigeria seeks World Trade Organization partnership on digital marine economy development. Akpabio assures Okonjo-Iweala of National Assembly's commitment to remove business barriers. Details can be found on page 6. New interest rate at 24.75% may worsen banks' NPLs. This is coming from analysts. And the writer says manufacturers will find it difficult to operate. Equities market response down 0.20%. You can start with the details on the front page. Omehia, not former governor, can't receive ex-governor's pension, court declares. Details can be found on page 29. That's all the news on Daily Independent.
On the Punch newspaper, Tinubu to vent Foreign Affairs Ministry ambassadorial list, detailed on page 7. NCC in season SIM NIN deadline, telcos to bear lines on Friday. NCC in season the SIM and NIN deadline, telcos bear lines on Friday. So if you're yet to do that, please do well to link your SIM card with your NIN so that you don't get affected by Friday. Unemployment responsible for the rising banditry and kidnapping coming from the former president, Obasanjo, detailed on page 22. And also on the 24.75% interest rate, OPS fears higher inflation, massive job cuts, detailed on page 21. The big story, CBN, EFCC probe banks and firms over alleged forex racketeering. CBN implement Teluti FX audit report. EFCC may summon CEOs over $2.4 billion invalid requests. Several FX requests fraudulent made with invalid illegal document. Cardoso insists. Detail can be found in the paper. Here we have 6 missing, 2 rescued as U.S. cargo ship destroyed Baltimore Bridge. You can find more detail of that story in the paper. Assassination allegation, my voice note distorted, say Gani Adams. More detail in the paper. We have still on the human angle where we have mom and others hail death sentence on the Chinese for killing a lover. Detail on page 4 and 5. Slave soldiers for burial today. Military demands killers captured, and I hope that they will do all that they can to make sure that these people are brought to book. But before we continue further with other paper analysis, we would love to take a break at this moment. Quite a lot to chew. We're looking at what the CBN have done concerning the inflation. That is the reason they are increasing the interest rate, and we're seeing that eventually banks will get affected and other, maybe OPS as well. So when we come back, we'll continue the paper review, and please do remember to drop your comment on our handle. We'll be back after this break.
Make your everyday informative, make your everyday count. Know your world, daily affairs, national and international, with authentic news events as they unfold on Global News and Zoom on Nigeria, Monday to Friday at 1 p.m.
Welcome back. We're still on the Dailies, where we have been looking at a number of stories where we're seeing Governor Lawan of Zamfara is calling on the president to please come to their rescue as the state is under siege, and also we're seeing that APC lawmakers are calling on President Tinubu to intervene in Plateau State. And also stories that are of quite of interest where we're seeing on the business angle, CBN have increased the interest rate to about 24.75%. That is in a way to actually control the inflation, or because of that. So you can do well to follow us live. Remember, you can drop your comment on Facebook or on YouTube, and then also let us hear your views on any of the story. I still have Rachel Tanza with me. Thank you so much, Rachel.
You're welcome, Sarah.
All right, let's continue with the paper review by looking at the Nation newspaper.
The big story on the paper: Governor, my state epicenter of kidnapping and banditry. Laos seeks full military action to stop bandits. Kidnappers should be treated as terrorists. Military frees 230 Boko Haram suspects. You can start with the details on the front page and continue on page 4. Troops raid Clark's home in search of soldiers' killers. Nakan in talks with Saudi authorities over Hajj visa shortage. PDP to review party leadership in wards, councils, and 26 states. Adams Iboho face-off deepens despite Oni's peace move. Details can be found on page 4. Security agencies begin probe of $2.4 billion unverified forex payment. Interest rate rises to 24.75%, while customers should pay more on bank loans by CBN. Experts analyze Apex Bank's monetary policy decisions. 16 excluded Plateau Assembly APC lawmakers seek president's intervention. You can find details on page 2. And at the downside of the paper, all set for Labour Party convention. Details on page 2. Lagos to experience above normal rainfall. Details can be found on page 26. And we have a picture story: busting bunkers, and where we can see the criminals and then their activities. And that's all the news on the Nation newspaper.
Yeah, Richard, I know there's the Dailies is not basically on business, but then looking at the step taken by CBN, I'm concerned because here where we're seeing why customers should pay more on banks' loan coming from the CBN. And we will recall, I think earlier this year or so, the reports so far coming is the fact that most of the people who borrow from banks are to feed themselves. So Rachel, imagine you going to borrow because of food, and then you are going to pay about over 23% or more interest, because definitely you're not collecting from the CBN, you're collecting central bank, you're collecting from the commercial bank. So imagine in as much as CBN is trying what they can do. But to some extent, I'm just looking at how it's going to affect our commercial banks, customers that will be covered, because people need this loan eventually. It would have been better if you need it for business, but you need it to feed. So what would now the effect of this is just what I'm just trying to wrap my head around and see how people are going to cope eventually with this policy coming from the CBN.
I'm honestly waiting to see how it's going to help curb the issue of inflation, because these interest rates are also one of the reasons we're having high inflation. Because when you are borrowing from banks, and then you have to consider the interest that you'll be paying back with your loan for your business. We're looking at manufacturers, we're looking at SMEs, we're looking at all the businesses that are having access to this loan from the direct money deposit banks and all of that. And then I am waiting, because this is trial and error. This is a test as it is now. It can't be for sure, because we just had February NPC meeting where we saw it going to 22, and then now we are at 24 point, and that one was by 400 base points, and now we are seeing more 200 base points, and just as speculated that this would have been within the margin that the central bank governor will increase the interest rate. So this is one thing now that we just have to wait and see how, because the aim of the central bank is to see that we are having inflation, that is headline inflation, down to 24%, and we know that as it is now, it's currently at 31%. So let's, I'm also, you know, keeping my fingers crossed to see how it's going to be. But then, for now, it's going to mean more inflation. I want to believe that this is a long run thing. It's definitely not short run, because when you are returning, these things become immediately implemented. So your interest rate will still count for your business. So you have to implement it immediately on your business for you to be able to pay back with the interest rate that has been put in as it is now. So it's going to be more high cost of production for businesses, and then even also how much these goods and services will be made available to consumers. So just be hopeful.
Just like Sir Rachel, just keep our fingers crossed and see how this turn out to be. On the Metrics newspaper, CBN governor unveils investigation into questionable foreign exchange transaction. Says several FX requests fraudulent, made with invalid and illegal documents. EFCC may summon CEOs over $2.4 billion invalid requests. You can read more detail of that inside the paper. And on sport here, we have Mali clips Super Eagles wings, consign Nigeria to 2-0 defeat in Morocco. You can read more detail of that on page 14. NCC directs telcos to disconnect all registered SIMs without proper NIN linkage. Subscribers have until Friday to rectify issues or be disconnected. Now we're having emphasis. Please do try and go link your NIN with your SIM card. And on insecurity, Tinubu talks tough. Says kidnappers are cowards, must be treated as terrorists. Ex-minister calls for non-kinetic approach, caution federal government against wasting too much money on acquiring arms and ammunition. Says millions of out-of-school children in northern Nigeria a production factory for banditry. Gumi reveals outcome of interaction with security agents, said it was productive. You can read detail in the paper. Also here we have again CBN raises interest rate to 24.75%. Obasanjo asks federal government to engage youth in agribusiness to curb the food insecurity. Also, Kwama killing, I have forgiven military for invading my country home, Pa Edward Clark is saying. Dauda Lawan seek President Tinubu's assistance to ending insecurity and banditry in Zamfara State. We have the picture story in the spirit of Ramadan, where we're seeing President Tinubu shaking the hands of Chief Justice of Nigeria, President Tinubu shaking the hands of the Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Ariwola, when the President hosted members of the Federal Judiciary to Ramadan dinner at the State House of Abuja recently. And that's all on Metrics newspaper.
So before we move to the next paper, the writer under the big story kind of caught my attention. And I don't know who is this ex-minister, calls for non-kinetic approach and cautions federal government against wasting too much money on acquiring arms and ammunition. I wish the person's name was mentioned, and I want to say that ex-minister, you are the problem. You were obviously one of the problem in Nigeria. And if you were an ex-minister where there was insecurity, you're obviously one of those advising against, you know, the real approach towards insecurity. We have not even yet, Sele, put in enough money into security, and you're talking about waste. It's different if we have overfunded our security agencies and then we now start talking that we are wasting. We have not even gotten to the point where they are funded enough. We have not even gotten to the point where they have ammunition in abundance. We are having our Air Force helicopters and jets crashing every now and then for test run. What does it mean? They are old, and we need. If you see how the world has advanced technologically when it comes to weapons grade, we are very backward. We are 300 years backward, Sele, I mean it. And for you to sit down and talk about waste when we haven't even funded enough, this is sad on a lot of level, because I want to believe that he might not be the only one with this mentality. We don't have enough yet. We don't have enough. And you're talking about waste. We are waiting on Trump to dash us fighter jets that they no longer use. They probably used it in the last World War and all of that. And that is the gifts we get from Germany and all of that. We are yet to get anywhere when it comes to the firepower in this country for any security agency. We are yet. And you are talking about too much money. And our security agencies are very much defunded as it is now. They don't have enough. Talk more of us talking about getting to the point of wasting. No. You are supposed to be in the position, if we are declaring state of emergency on insecurity, you are supposed to be in the position of telling the government to do more when it comes to funding weapons and arms in this country, except if you are coming out to say that the government is putting in much money which we're not aware of, and perhaps what is being used for is not, then now we will start probing corruption in the military and say, okay, this much has been put into the military and we cannot see the dividend that this has been purchased and that, except if that is the situation. But not for you to come and say waste. You can't waste money on insecurity. You can't waste. If you see the budget of some country when it comes to security, is 10 times the budget for the entire country in Nigeria. I know they have more money, more than us, but the point I'm trying to say is that it's still top priority, even in safe countries that are safer than Nigeria. There's not too much money put when it comes to the issue of security in a country. You can't use that kind of word. It's unacceptable. We need more, if possible, into fighting insecurity in this country.
Richard, I believe that possibly what the ex-minister Mina, or rather, it didn't come out as he wanted it to. Let me believe so. Because just like you said, we can never say there's too much money. Of course, we know when we look at our budget, security, when it comes to money that goes to security, it actually do take a chunk of the budget. And I believe there's nobody that actually argued to say that, you know what, too much is given. Why? Because with the reality we're facing on ground, we need it. We cannot even compare the ammunition that our army have compared with the ammunition that these terrorists do have. You see them having some AK-47 that our army men do not even have. When you check some of their arms, you will know that it's really, really, I mean, those are supposed to be given to our hunters to use and not for them to use it to fight. But nevertheless, yes, he's calling for non-kinetic approach. And a number of people, not just him, have said the fact that we need both the non-kinetic and kinetic. It depends. Imagine the 131 students. Imagine if it was a more kinetic measure that was used. Possibly we'll have casualties eventually. So possibly you have to study the scenario, the case, and say, okay, what should we put here? But not for you to say totally, we cannot say totally we are going to eradicate using of force. We have to use both force and then also wait for non-kinetic. And I think it's one of the things Bumi also said during his interview, the fact that the government have to use non-kinetic measure because people will be affected and all of that. But then just like you rightly stated the fact that, I mean, when you compare it with other countries, we are nothing compared to them. We need more when it comes to, as far as things are going the way they are. The government cannot help but keep pumping money. But what we're looking for is that as much as the government is spending money, we should see the evidence of our money. We should be able to see that ours, even our army men, are well taken care of. Let's not even talk about their ammunition. How about their welfare? How much do they receive? There was an interview that was circulating on social media where an army man was saying he can't even make it home because, okay, even if he's on leave, he was saying then that his money was just barely a little 50,000 or a little above 50,000. So imagine an army man collecting 50,000. How much is transportation if you're living down east or down north, depending on where you are being posted? You end up spending that money just for transport fare, and you've not even gotten there. So let's not even talk about the ammunition and the arms. How about their welfare? Are they well taken care of? How about their family members? Now, these 17 slain soldiers that have died, how much will be going to their family members for them to be well taken care of? So I think there's more beyond just how much we spend on ammunition and arms. How about their welfare? So we cannot say too much money, or we cannot say we are wasting money on that regards, Rachel.
All right. The next paper, which is the Nature News, the big story: federal government confirms ginger blight epidemic in FCT and 3 states. Details can be found on page 3. UNDP launches weather kits campaign to combat climate change. Nigeria receives 15 billion yen agricultural support from Japan. Details can be found on page 6. Salako pledges to address challenges of methane emission in Nigeria. Aftermath of Nature News report on coastal erosion, NDDC visit Bayelsa community. Microsoft partners with the next 150 to advance carbon removal efforts. CAMIC backs Nemo Basi advocacy against GMO foods in Nigeria. Fish farmers lament death of 100 tilapia fish in their ponds. Nature Care, aniseed antidote to cough. You can find details on page 15. Danny Kerr, England's scrum half, retires from international rugby. Details can be found on page 21, and that's all the news on Nature News.
Well, our agriculture seems to be affected, Rachel. We're having ginger, we're also having our fish farmers complaining. So that is to say that possibly tilapia fish will be expensive in the market. That is the implication. And we're having that there is an epidemic for ginger. That is to say, I'm just imagining our ginger farmers in Kaduna and FCT. I mean, people have made quite enough money when it comes to ginger farming. I know of a few people who made quite a lot. So I just don't want to even imagine what they're going to present because of that. And every time we have that, it's either we're having our tomatoes, or we're having our Irish potato, or we're having one thing or the other. And I think we have to grow in, we have to advance to a level where we see these things coming, we'll do something before we actually run a loss eventually. So I really have to sympathize with the people who got affected by this, and I hope we'll do something about this. Well, let's take a look at the next paper, which is the Sweet Crook report. Let's see what's happening at the oil sector. FID on Nigeria-Morocco gas pipeline coming in December, coming from Kiare, advocates differentiating energy transition for Africa. You can start reading on the front page and continue on page 2. NNPC will use gas to trigger Nigeria's development. And the big story for the paper: federal government raises NNPC contract approval threshold above $10 million. Slashes approval period to 15 days maximum, detailed in the paper. NCDMB conduct NLNG train 7 monitoring visit in South Korea. More detailed in the paper, and that's all for the Sweet Crook report.
On Business Day newspaper, the big story: CBN hikes rate again in push to tame inflation. Raises merchant bank CRR to 14%. 600 base point increase, enough to attract foreign investors, coming from analysts. Airfare crash on international route over FX and Air Peace debut. President Tinubu did not foresee the enormity of Nigeria's challenges. This is coming from Bayo Onanuga. Beyond the podium, lessons from the 2023 African Games. And that's all the news on Business Day newspaper.
All right, let's look at another business paper, which is the Business Times newspaper. Nigeria insurance industry gross premium stood at 1.003 trillion naira in the fourth quarter of 2023, coming from the NAICOM. CBN tells bank to expedite action on recapitalization. And Rwanda is saying if CBN implement right policy, Naira will appreciate. You can find that on page 7. The big story is a question why we hike the MPR to 24.7%, coming from the Monetary Policy Committee. Expert Flay decision said it would lead to recession, urges the CBN to have regard to growth concern. More detail on page 2. Credit to private sector hit 80.9 trillion naira amid rising inflation rate. Poor infrastructure, a challenge to Africa's e-commerce coming from the UNECA. World Trade Organization boss that's talking about Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala urges members to complete unfinished business on the PC-13 work. It's SEC duty to regulate cryptocurrency transaction, not CBN, coming from Cardoso, says collaboration with SEC, EFCC, NSA on Berna's positive. You can find more detail in the paper, and that's all on Business Times newspaper. Let's take the last sporting paper, Rachel.
On Punch Sport Extra, Napoli ready to lower Osimhen's price. Dessa aims DIG at Pesaro. Then we have Scotland-based keeper eyes Eyimba Eagle. Liverpool United battle for Chaser. And City sweat over Walker ahead Arsenal clash. Greenwood £49.8 million prize care suitors. Dalot snubs Onana. Falcons keeper confident of Bayana win. The big story on the paper, Africa's best. Boniface rated ahead Inaki, Kudus, Ayu, Okoye, Osimhen in Europe. Arsenal match Chelsea's £51 million Diomande offer. And at the downside of the paper, ex-Yellow Greens captain Onikoyi retires. Joshua Hill's African Games champion Mbata. You can find details on page 3. And that's all the news on Punch Sports Extra.
Well, that's how far we can go this morning on the Dailies. Thank you, Rachel, for doing this with me.
Sarah.
And thank you to our viewers. Thank you to the crew members, every one of you, for making sure this program was a success. Until we come your way tomorrow, do have a great day ahead.